Clara lived alone on a quiet piece of land far from the busy town. Her small farmhouse stood between wide stretches of fields that needed constant care. Every morning she woke before the sun and stepped outside to check on the animals, gather water, and look over the fences. The land was peaceful, and she loved it, but the silence often grew heavy. She had no one to talk to, no one to share meals with, and no one to help her when the work became too much for one pair of hands. The days felt long, and the nights felt even longer. She tried to stay strong, but living alone for years had slowly worn her spirit down. One evening, after finishing her chores, Clara sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea. The walls around her were quiet. She looked at the empty chair across from her and felt a deep ache inside. She had always hoped to build a life with someone, but life had passed by quickly, and she never found the right person. Most men who came near her farm were travelers who did not stay long, or people who were not serious about building a home. Clara wanted someone honest, someone reliable, someone who could share her life and not leave when things became difficult. A few weeks earlier, a neighbor had told her about mail-order marriage. It sounded strange to Clara at first, but she learned it was not uncommon for people in far places to write to each other, promise a future, and choose to build a life together. Many women with land and hard responsibilities sent letters to men who wanted a new start. And many men who felt unseen or lonely answered with hope in their hearts. Clara did not want to make a quick decision, but the idea stayed with her. She kept thinking about what it would be like to have a partner who cared, someone who could help her, someone she could also support. That night, as she sat alone in the dim light of her lantern, she made up her mind. She took out a piece of paper and started writing a letter. In simple words, she shared her life, her hopes, and her honesty. She described her farm, her daily work, and her wish for someone kind and steady. She did not promise a perfect life, but she offered loyalty and a home filled with sincerity. She wrote slowly, choosing every word carefully. She wanted the person reading her letter to know exactly what kind of woman she was: strong, hardworking, but also tired of being alone. When she finished, she folded the letter, sealed it, and sent it off with a quiet prayer. She did not know who would read it or if anyone would answer, but she felt lighter after sending it. She hoped her words would reach someone who understood her heart. Far away, no, in another state, a large man named Samuel sat in a small room in a lumber mill camp. He had worked there for many years, using his great strength to move heavy logs and help keep the mill running. The other workers often respected his strength, but also teased him for his size. Samuel was heavier and broader than most men, and horses struggled to carry him. He did not let rude comments bother him, but deep inside, he wished for a life where people saw more than his size. He wanted someone who saw his heart, not just his body. He wanted a home, a family, and someone who cared for him the way he cared for others. One afternoon, a new letter arrived with the mail delivered to the camp. Samuel almost ignored it, thinking it was for someone else, but his name was written neatly on the front. When he opened it and began reading Clara's words, something stirred inside him. Her honesty touched him, and her simple way of describing her life made him feel like he could picture every corner of her farm. She did not hide her struggles, nor did she pretend to be someone she was not. Her sincerity felt like a warm light shining into his quiet life. He read her letter again that night, then again the next morning. Something about Clara made him feel understood, even though they had never met. After thinking for days, he finally decided to answer her. He wrote a letter telling her about his work, his strength, and the life he wanted. He admitted he was heavy and that riding horses was difficult for him, but he also shared that he was hardworking, loyal, and willing to walk miles if needed. When he sent the letter, he hoped she would not judge him for his size, but he felt she deserved the truth. Clara received his letter on a cool morning. She sat on her porch and read it slowly, feeling her heart warm with each sentence. Samuel's words were full of humility and honesty. He did not brag about anything. He simply told her who he was, what he could offer, and what he hoped for. His size did not bother her at all. In fact, she admired that he shared it openly. After thinking for only one day, she wrote him another letter, saying she would be glad to meet him and that he was welcome to come to her farm whenever he felt ready. When Samuel read her reply, something changed inside him. No one had ever accepted him so quickly and kindly. He made arrangements to leave the lumber mill and travel by train to the town closest to Clara's farm. He packed his few belongings in a small bag and kept her letter in his shirt pocket as he traveled. The journey was long, but he felt excited for the first time in years. He imagined what Clara's voice might sound like, what her smile might look like, and what it would feel like to finally meet someone who wrote to him with such warmth. When the train stopped near Clara's town, Samuel stepped off with hope in his heart. He had arranged for a horse to take him to her farm, but when he tried to mount it, the animal struggled under his weight. The stable worker gave him an apology, saying the horse could not carry someone of his size for so many miles. Samuel felt embarrassed, but not defeated. He had promised Clara he would come, and he meant it. He looked at the dirt road stretching ahead and decided he would walk the entire way. It did not matter if the journey was slow. It mattered that he reached her. The day was warm, and the sun was bright. Samuel tightened the straps of his bag, took a deep breath, and began to walk. His boots sank into the dust with each heavy step, but he kept moving. The road stretched far, with open fields on both sides. No shade covered him, and he soon felt sweat forming on his forehead. But he did not complain. He walked with steady determination, thinking of Clara waiting for him at her gate. Every mile he walked made him think about the life he hoped to build. Even as his legs ached and his back grew tired, he pushed forward. Hours passed. Samuel drank water from a small bottle and rested only when necessary. He leaned on a sturdy stick he found by the roadside, using it to support his weight. As the sun began to lower in the sky, his clothes grew dusty and his steps grew slow, but his resolve grew stronger. He imagined arriving at Clara's home, introducing himself respectfully, proving through action, not words, that he was a man she could rely on. Clara, stood by her farm gate, waiting. She had been expecting a rider to appear on the road at any moment. As the hours passed with no sign of a horse, she felt her heart twist with worry. She wondered if Samuel had changed his mind, or if something had delayed him. She held her hands together tightly and kept her eyes on the road, refusing to return inside until she saw him. Then, in the early evening light, Clara noticed a figure far down the road. It did not look like a man on a horse. It looked like someone walking slowly, using a stick for balance. Her breath caught as the figure came closer. When she finally recognized Samuel, tired but still moving forward with purpose, she felt a wave of emotion wash over her. He had walked miles for her simply because he promised he would come. She hurried to the gate, opening it wide as he approached. Samuel stopped in front of her, breathing hard but wearing a humble smile. He apologized for his late arrival and told her the truth that the horse could not carry him. He chose to walk, to show her he meant every word he wrote. Clara looked at him with quiet admiration. She offered him water, guided him inside, and felt her heart soften toward this man who walked so far just to keep his word. In that moment, Clara no longer saw a stranger. She saw a man with a sincere soul, a man who kept his promises, a man who was not afraid of effort. And Samuel, exhausted but hopeful, saw a woman who welcomed him with kindness instead of judgment. Their journey had begun with letters, but now, standing face to face, something real had just taken its first breath. Clara led Samuel inside the small farmhouse, and he followed quietly, careful with every step. His legs still trembled from the long walk, and dust covered his boots and clothes. But he held himself straight, not wanting to seem weak on the first day they met. Clara noticed his tired breathing and the way he used the wall for balance, but she did not mention it. Instead, she guided him to a wooden chair near the table and gently placed a glass of cool water in front of him. Samuel thanked her softly, his voice rough from the long journey, and drank slowly. Trying to regain his strength, Clara stood nearby, watching him with a mix of admiration and worry. She could not imagine how difficult it must have been to walk so many miles under the hot sun. The road from town to her farm was long, even for someone riding a horse, and he had walked the entire way without stopping at any house or asking for help. His determination touched her deeply. She realized that his decision to keep walking said, more about him than any letter ever could. Samuel felt her gaze, but did not feel judged. Instead, he felt seen in a way he hadn't in years. He sat quietly, letting the coolness of the water ease the dryness in his throat. After a moment, he looked at Clara with sincere eyes and apologized again for arriving late and in such a worn-out state. Clara shook her head firmly. She told him he had nothing to apologize for, and that she respected his effort more than any grand arrival on horseback. Soon, Clara went to the kitchen area and warmed a simple meal. She moved around with gentle steps, glancing at Samuel now and then. She did not want him to feel uncomfortable or out of place. When the food was ready, she placed a bowl in front of him, telling him he needed strength after such a long walk. Samuel hesitated for a moment, not wanting to appear greedy, but hunger overcame him. He ate slowly, grateful for every bite, grateful for her kindness, grateful that he had reached her home safely. While he ate, Clara sat across from him. The silence between them was not awkward. It was calm, like two people learning how to share space for the first time. When Samuel finished, he thanked her again, and Clara felt warmth spread through her heart. His gratitude felt honest, and she admired the way he spoke with respect. It's not just to her, but about everything around him. When Samuel stood up to return the bowl, Clara noticed how stiff his legs were. He tried to hide the pain, but she could see he had pushed himself far beyond his limits. She told him to rest, but he insisted he could help with the chores. He did not want her to think he came only to be cared for. Clara gently held up her hand, insisting that tonight he should rest. There would be enough work for both of them in the coming days. After washing up, Samuel stepped outside to breathe the fresh evening air. Clara joined him, and they stood side by side near the porch, watching the sky slowly fill with shades of orange and gold as the sun dipped lower. The air was cool and carried the scent of soil and grass. Samuel looked around the farm, taking in the quiet beauty of the land he might soon call home. Clara noticed the calm on his face and felt a small wave of relief. She wanted him to feel safe here. They began talking soft, simple words at first. Clara asked about his journey, and Samuel shared how every step reminded him of his promise. He told her how he found strength by imagining her waiting at the gate. Clara listened closely, her heart beating a little faster each time he mentioned how important it was to keep his word to her. She had not felt this kind of steady presence in her life for a long time. Then she told him about her farm, how she had been managing it alone since her parents passed away. She explained the routine of her days and how the land sometimes felt too big for one person. Samuel nodded with understanding, respect clear in his eyes. He did not judge her or offer easy solutions. He simply listened, which made Clara feel more comfortable than she expected. As the sky darkened, they talked more. Samuel shared stories from his work at the lumber mill, describing how he used his strength to move heavy logs and how he often stayed late to help others. He explained that although people respected him for his strength, they rarely saw past it. Many assumed he could handle anything just because he was large and strong. But he also carried his own worries and dreams, just like anyone else. Clara listened with kindness, and Samuel felt something shift inside him. He realized he didn't need to hide his feelings here. He didn't need to pretend or act tougher than he was. Clara's gentle attention made him feel comfortable in his own skin, feeling he hadn't known for years. After a while, Clara lit a small lantern and invited Samuel back inside. She showed him the small guest room where he could sleep for the night. It was simple, with a clean bed, folded blankets, and a small window that looked out over the field. Samuel felt grateful beyond words. He placed his bag down and turned to Clara, telling her that the room was more than enough. Clara smiled, her eyes warm, and told him to rest well after such a long day. Before she left the room, Samuel quietly thanked her again, not just for the place to sleep, but for everything. Clara nodded and stepped out, closing the door softly behind her. Samuel sat on the edge of the bed, letting out a long breath. He felt tired, but it was a good kind of tired. He felt safe, welcome, and hopeful. Clara lingered for a moment outside the room, thinking about Samuel's arrival. She thought about the strength it took for him to walk all those miles. She thought about his quiet manners, his sincerity, and his humble way of talking. She had invited a stranger into her home, yet she felt no fear, only a calm feeling that perhaps this was the right step for both of them. That night, Clara sat by the window, watching the stars appear one by one. She wondered what tomorrow would bring. She did not expect life to transform overnight, but she sensed that Samuel's presence would bring new hope, new steadiness. She noticed how he looked at her with respect, not expectation. She appreciated how he treated her farm as something valuable, not something to take advantage of. Inside his room, Samuel lay on the bed, staring up at the wooden ceiling. His muscles ached, but his spirit felt lighter than it had in years. He thought about Clara's warm smile, the way she welcomed him without judgment, the kindness in her voice. He thought about her strength, how she managed the farm alone, and how she still made space for someone like him. He felt grateful in a quiet, steady way as the night settled deeper. Samuel drifted into sleep, knowing he had reached a place where he could build something meaningful. Clara also slept peacefully, having felt something gentle opening in her heart. The next day would be the start of their true life together, not as strangers who wrote letters, but as two people learning to share a home, share responsibilities, and perhaps share their hearts. The first meeting had not been grand or dramatic. It had been simple, honest, and filled with small moments of understanding. And sometimes, Clara thought, as she fell asleep, it was these simple beginnings that made the strongest stories. Samuel had walked miles to reach her, but she now realized the greater journey was the one they were about to take together. The following morning, Samuel woke early as the sun's first light filtered through the small window. The air was crisp, and dew sparkled on the grass. He stretched carefully, mindful of the soreness in his legs and back from the long walk he had completed just a day before. Clara had already begun her chores. He could hear the soft clatter of buckets and the gentle bleating of the animals. He dressed quickly, washed his face at the small basin, and stepped outside to join her. The farm felt alive in the morning light, and Samuel felt a new kind of energy. This was a life he wanted to be part of, a life worth working for, no matter how hard it became. Clara was milking the cows when Samuel approached. He did not rush her, instead waiting patiently until she acknowledged him. She smiled softly, and he returned the smile. Without a word, he picked up the empty buckets and followed her to the barn. Together they worked in harmony, their movements not awkward but fluid, as if they had been doing these tasks together for years. Samuel marveled at her strength and efficiency. He admired how she handled the animals gently but firmly, guiding the cows as they produced milk, and spoke softly to them. He felt a deep respect for her, realizing that managing this farm alone required courage and determination beyond what many could imagine. After finishing the milking, Clara and Samuel moved to repair a section of the fence that had been weakened by the recent windstorm. Samuel took the heavier tools, lifting and hammering with skill despite the lingering soreness in his muscles. Clara handed him nails, measured planks, and held posts steady while he worked. At one point, Samuel paused, wiping sweat from his brow and catching his breath. Clara noticed the strain and offered him water, but he waved her off, insisting he could continue. His pride was not in showing off strength, but in proving that he was capable and reliable. Clara felt her heart warm as she watched him work with such care and determination. By mid-morning, clouds began to gather, signaling an approaching storm. The wind picked up, and the air grew heavy with moisture. Clara called to Samuel, suggesting they take a break, but he insisted they continue. "We have to finish this before the storm hits," he said, his voice calm but firm. Clara agreed, though she worried about the heavy rain. Together, they finished reinforcing the fence just as the first drops of rain began to fall. Samuel's large frame was soaked within minutes, and his clothes clung to him, but he did not complain. Clara admired his perseverance, realizing that this was a man who would not give up when things became difficult. The rain intensified, turning into a steady downpour. Clara ran to grab a lantern and stood under the small porch, shouting instructions to Samuel as he climbed carefully onto a ladder to fix the roof of the barn. His size made the job slower, and each step required careful balance. The wind blew strongly, threatening to knock the ladder off balance, but Samuel held firm. Clara kept the lantern steady, calling out warnings when the wind became too fierce. She could see the concentration in his eyes, the determination in his posture, and she felt a surge of admiration. This was not just a man who walked miles to reach her. This was a man who would protect her farm and herself. Even in the most difficult conditions, hours passed as Samuel worked tirelessly, repairing the damage caused by the storm. Clara remained close, offering him support in every way she could. When he finally climbed down, soaked, muddy, and exhausted, he sank onto the porch steps. Clara brought him a warm towel, helping him dry off, and offered a bowl of hot soup. He accepted gratefully, sitting quietly as the warmth of the meal and the towel eased the chill from his bones. Clara noticed the fatigue in his eyes and spoke softly, telling him he had done more than anyone could ask. The lonely smiled faintly, feeling a quiet pride in completing the work without giving in to frustration or pain as the storm passed. They sat together on the porch, watching the clouds disperse and the sun begin to peek through. The farm glistened with raindrops, the fields looking greener and more vibrant than before. Clara handed Samuel a cup of tea, and he accepted it, feeling the warmth spread through him. They did not speak much at first. The silence was comfortable, a shared understanding between two people who had spent a long, hard day working side by side. Samuel realized that this partnership, built in effort and perseverance, was stronger than any grand declaration could have been. Clara broke the silence, asking Samuel about his life before the journey. He spoke about his family, the long hours at the lumber mill, and the challenges he had faced because of his size. Many people had doubted him, teased him, or underestimated his abilities, but he had never let it change who he was. Clara listened intently, her heart swelling with respect. She saw in him not just physical strength but emotional resilience, patience, and integrity. She realized that this man could be a steady presence in her life, someone who could walk with her through hardships without complaint. Samuel, in turn, asked Clara about her life on the farm. She spoke of the loneliness, the struggles, and the small joys that came with managing her land. She told him about the nights when the wind howled, and she feared the animals would escape or the roof would leak. Samuel listened carefully, offering practical suggestions when appropriate, but never dismissing her experiences. He admired her independence, her intelligence, and her courage. The more they shared, the more they understood each other. The connection between them deepened with every word, every gesture, every shared moment of work and care. As evening fell, they prepared a simple meal together. Clara handed Samuel a knife and asked him to help chop vegetables, and he did so with care, making sure not to cut himself or damage the produce. They laughed together over small mistakes, like when a carrot slipped and rolled across the floor. Samuel felt lighter than he had in years, the weight of loneliness and uncertainty lifting as he worked alongside Clara. She, too, felt a spark of hope, realizing that life did not have to be endured alone. Together, they could face the challenges that lay ahead. After dinner, they cleaned up, working in quiet coordination. Samuel carried heavy water buckets to the animals, and Clara checked the pens and gates. The storm had left the earth soft and muddy, but they did not complain. Each task was a chance to learn about one another, to see how the other handled difficulties, and to build trust. By the time the chores were done, the night had grown quiet. A gentle moonlight illuminated the farm. They returned to the farmhouse, tired but satisfied. Clara noticed the way Samuel moved carefully, aware of his size, yet always mindful of the space around him. She appreciated his consideration, his humility, and the steady rhythm of his actions. Samuel, for his part, admired Clara's endurance, her calm focus, and the quiet confidence she carried. In that moment, both realized that their connection was not built on appearances or wealth, but on shared effort, respect, and understanding. Later, as they sat by the fire, Clara shared a story from her childhood about helping her parents with the farm, about learning to work hard and stay patient through challenges. Samuel listened, occasionally adding small anecdotes about his own past, about days when he felt unseen or underestimated. The firelight flickered across their faces, casting warmth and shadows. In those stories they found common ground, resilience, patience, and hope. They laughed softly at the memories, and sometimes their smiles held deeper meaning, hinting at a bond that was slowly taking root. Before they went to bed, Clara brought Samuel a blanket and a fresh cup of water.
Ow.
He thanked her, and she smiled, telling him that she had felt welcomed by his honesty and effort, just as he had felt welcomed by her acceptance and kindness. They spoke quietly about the future, not with grand plans or promises, but with simple thoughts about how they could support each other, how they could face the next day together. Samuel felt a deep sense of belonging, and Clara felt a warmth she had not known in years. As they finally went to their separate rooms to rest, the quiet of the night settled over the farm. Samuel lay awake for a while, thinking about the day, the work, the storm, the shared laughter, and the moments of understanding. He realized that this was more than just a visit. It was the beginning of something real, something meaningful. Clara lay in her own bed, thinking about the same day, about the man who had walked miles to reach her, and about how naturally he had fit into her life. Neither of them knew exactly what the future held, but they felt certain that it was worth facing together. The stormy day had tested them both in small ways, showing their strengths, patience, and willingness to support each other. It had also revealed their care, respect, and admiration. Both understood that life on the farm would continue to bring challenges, but for the first time, neither felt they had to face those challenges alone. They had found in each other a quiet strength, a dependable presence, and a shared hope that could grow into something lasting by the time the moon rose high. The farm was calm again, and the sounds of nature filled the night. Samuel and Clara had spent the day proving to themselves and each other that effort, honesty, and kindness were stronger than any obstacle. They had faced physical labor, weather, and uncertainty together, and through it all, their bond had deepened. Each had seen the best in the other, not just in words, but in action. And as they drifted into sleep, they carried with them the next morning, Samuel woke to the soft light of dawn streaming through the small window of the guest room. He stretched carefully, feeling the familiar ache in his muscles from the work of the previous days. But the pain seemed lighter now. It was a good kind of tired, the kind that comes from meaningful effort, from doing work that mattered, and from walking a long journey that had led him here. He dressed quickly and stepped outside, where the air was crisp and clean. The farm was quiet, except for the soft sounds of birds and the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. Clara was already outside, carrying water to the animals, and she smiled when she saw him approaching. Samuel moved with care, mindful of the soft earth beneath his boots. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the fields with golden light. He admired how the farm seemed to glow, how the simple fences, the barns, and the small garden all looked alive in the morning. He had worked in many places before, lifting heavy logs, moving supplies, completing tasks that tested his strength, but this felt different. This was work that mattered not just to him, but to someone he cared about, someone who cared about him. Clara noticed him standing quietly, watching the land, and she called out a cheerful greeting. Samuel smiled, feeling a warmth that had little to do with the sun. They began their morning chores together. Samuel helped feed the animals, lifting heavy buckets of grain and carrying them to the pens. Clara guided him on which animals needed more attention and how to handle the younger ones gently. Samuel admired her care and precision. Realizing how much knowledge and patience she had gained from years of managing the farm alone, it was no small task, and seeing her manage it all with calm focus made him respect her even more. They moved side by side, speaking in quiet tones, sometimes laughing at small mishaps, sometimes sharing advice, but always working as a team. Later, they turned their attention to planting new crops in the field. The soil was still soft from the recent storm, and Samuel worked carefully to plow the land and prepare it for seeds. Clara handed him tools, guided his movements, and shared her knowledge about planting. Samuel listened intently, wanting to learn everything he could to help the farm thrive. He admired Clara's skill and dedication, and she appreciated his willingness to learn and his steady effort. They moved together across the field, their steps in rhythm, their hands working side by side and slowly. The farm began to take shape under their care. As the day progressed, clouds began to gather again, signaling another possible storm. Clara looked at the sky with a hint of worry, but Samuel reassured her. "We have faced worse," he said calmly. We can handle whatever comes." His words carried a quiet confidence that made Clara feel safe. She realized that his presence was more than physical strength. It was also the emotional support he offered, a steady reassurance that no challenge was too great when faced together. That afternoon, they worked on repairing a small section of the barn that had been weakened by wind. Samuel lifted heavy beams into place, while Clara guided him and held tools steady. The work was tiring, but they did not complain, finding satisfaction in the progress they made together. By evening, the farm was quiet again, and the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the fields. Clara and Samuel sat on the porch, tired but content. Samuel wiped sweat from his brow and smiled at her, feeling a deep sense of belonging. Clara felt the same, realizing that she had found not just a helper, but someone who understood her life, respected her efforts, and cared about her well-being. They spoke quietly about their day, sharing thoughts and small stories, their conversation flowing naturally without effort. Each word strengthened the bond between them, creating a sense of comfort and trust that neither had expected so quickly. As night fell, they prepared a simple meal together, sharing the tasks with ease. Samuel chopped vegetables and carried water, while Clara cooked and arranged the table. They laughed together over small mistakes, like when a carrot rolled off the cutting board or when water splashed from the bucket. These small moments of shared effort created a rhythm of life that was comforting and joyful. Samuel felt lighter in spirit than he had in years, and Clara felt a renewed hope that life could be shared and that challenges could be faced together. After dinner, they cleaned up, working side by side in harmony. Samuel carried heavy buckets to the animals and repaired a broken gate, while Clara tended to the smaller details, checking that everything was in place. They moved with a quiet understanding, communicating through glances and gestures as much as words. Samuel admired Clara's efficiency and calm approach to work, and she admired his steady presence, his willingness to take responsibility, and his care in every action. The partnership they were forming was built on mutual respect, shared effort, and simple acts of kindness. Later, as they sat by the fire, Clara shared stories from her past, recounting moments of joy, struggle, and learning. Samuel listened with attention, occasionally adding small anecdotes from his own life, sharing his challenges and the lessons he had learned. The firelight danced across their faces, casting warm shadows, and the room felt cozy and safe. In their stories, they found common ground, resilience, patience, and the understanding that life's difficulties were easier when faced together. Their laughter was gentle, their smiles meaningful, and each moment deepened their connection. As the night grew darker, Samuel and Clara reflected on their journey so far. Samuel thought about the long miles he had walked to reach her, the effort it had taken, and the hope that had carried him forward. He realized that each step had been worth it, not just to reach her home, but to begin building a life together. Clara thought about his honesty, his care, and the way he had seamlessly become part of her daily routine. She realized that she had found someone who would stand by her through difficulties, someone who could be trusted, someone who could share both work and life. Before bed, Clara prepared a blanket and a cup of water for Samuel. He thanked her quietly, appreciating the thoughtfulness in her actions. She smiled, telling him she was grateful for his presence, for his effort, and for the way he had chosen to be there with her. They spoke softly about the days ahead, not making promises, but expressing hope that they could continue to work and live together in harmony. Samuel felt a sense of peace he had never known, and Clara felt a warmth that came from knowing someone genuinely cared for her. That night, they each went to their own rooms, but the quiet comfort of their connection lingered. Samuel lay in bed, thinking about the day, about the shared labor, the storm, and the small victories they had achieved together. He realized that this partnership was not built on words alone, but on actions, effort, and understanding. Clara lay awake for a while as well, reflecting on the same thoughts, appreciating the steady, reliable presence of the man who had walked miles to reach her and had worked tirelessly to become part of her life. In the days that followed, they continued their routine, facing small challenges together, Samuel learned more about the farm, mastering tasks that had once seemed daunting. And Clara found comfort in his unwavering support. Each day brought new lessons and small successes, strengthening their bond. They shared laughter, quiet moments of reflection, and the satisfaction of completing work side by side. Slowly, their home became a place of warmth, trust, and growing affection. Samuel no longer felt like an outsider, and Clara no longer felt the loneliness that had weighed on her for years. One morning, Samuel stepped into the field to plow the soil for new crops. The work was slow, and the plow was heavy, but he moved steadily, knowing that each effort contributed to the farm's future. Clara watched him for a moment, noting the care in his movements, the determination in his eyes, and the gentle patience he showed even in hard labor. She felt a deep admiration. Realizing that his dedication extended beyond physical strength, it was also the care he put into building a life together. Samuel glanced at her, and in that glance, both felt a silent understanding. The effort, the time, and the shared moments had already built something lasting. After finishing the field work, Samuel returned to the house, muddy and tired, but content. Clara greeted him with a warm smile and a fresh cup of tea. They spoke quietly about the next day, making small plans for planting, repairing, and caring for the animals. They did not rush, did not demand perfection, but instead focused on steady progress and shared responsibility. In these quiet moments, they found joy, fulfillment, and a sense of partnership that neither had expected to find so quickly. As the sun set, Clara approached Samuel while he rested on the porch. She touched his arm gently and said softly, "You didn't have to walk miles for me, but I am glad you did." Samuel looked at her with gentle eyes and a soft smile. "Every step was worth it," he replied, his voice calm and steady. In that simple exchange, no grand declarations were needed. They both understood that their bond had been forged through effort, honesty, and shared experience. Words could not fully express what they felt, but their actions had already spoken volumes. That night, they prepared for bed, tired but fulfilled. Samuel reflected on the journey that had brought him here, on the miles he had walked, and on the trust he had built with Clara. Clara thought about the man who had chosen to be with her, not because